This is Keeping It Human in AI Kids content, really thinking about creator guidelines for those who are jumping into this space. I cannot get my slides to go forward. There we go. All right. So I'm Dr. Carla Engelbrecht. I have spent the last 25 plus years creating all sorts of interactive and education and entertainment products for Netflix, Sesame Street, PBS Kids, highlights for children. You can see some of my favorites that I've made on the screen. I'm best known probably for doing the Netflix interactive titles. So Black Mirror Bandersnatch, You versus Wild, Puss in Book, all of those. And now I spend a lot of time in the AI space. So I use AI for content production, for written work, for prototypes and product development, for automated production pipelines. I use it for life and business operations. So I hate doing expenses. And it's so nice to be able to hand off like credit card statements to Claude and Excel and let it do its thing. I've never been on top of those, and I finally am on top of those. And I use it for a lot of research and learning. That said, I have a lot of feelings about this whole space, and definitely am not just a full-on like go for it kind of person, but that's what we're going to talk about today. I mentioned using it for content creation. So I've done a lot of kids videos. These are some of the ones I've created with AI. I use AI for the writing and scripting, for the lyrics development. I use for the music development, for the animation, for the editing, all of those different pieces. It's fun. It's crazy. There's all sorts of ups and downs to it. I also do a lot of writing and speaking and consulting on AI literacy and integrating it. And so these are some of the pieces that I've written. I post both to LinkedIn or Substack. Everyone Poops Except Claude has been one of my more popular ones of really just thinking about anthropomorphization and AI and how we navigate that. But I also share things around how I do production, how to talk about AI with kids. And then I do a lot of stuff around brain rot and AI slop and the kind of really like icky content that's out there. I get this question a lot. So just to share the main tools that I use for LLMs, I use Claude predominantly and then Gemini part-time. So probably 75% of my work I use Claude. For images, I tend to use Nano Banana Pro, Midjourney. I'm using those. I use Nano Banana Pro through Google Flow's interface. Audio, I use Suno for music, 11 Labs for voiceover. For video, I really like Veo and Omni via the Flow tooling. I use Runway Kling, all of the others. I experiment constantly. For editing, I use DaVinci Resolve when I'm doing very fine-tuned editing. I also really like Remotion and Hyperframes, which are code-based ones that I can then develop with Claude and do entirely through code. And then from a coding perspective, I use Claude Code a lot, VS Code terminals. Sometimes I'm back in like the Claude desktop app, and sometimes I'm using Gemini with anti-gravity, but it kind of varies on that. My main computer is a Mac Studio M4 Max. I actually can run some models locally on that, but generally find I'm working with the frontier models, and so I need to be doing that in the cloud. And yes, my monthly AI services bill is about $500 a month, assuming I remember to cancel subscriptions on the ones that I've been experimenting with. I love this quote. You might have seen me post it to LinkedIn recently. It's pretty much in every single talk I give now. Technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. So this is Melvin Kranzberg's first law of technology. And I really love to anchor with this because I think there's a lot of feels around AI right now. There's a lot of people who are very anti and against it for lots of different reasons. There's a lot of people who are very pro. I am somewhere in the middle, that there are good things and bad things, and really try to be aware of that. And I really think it's important to think about technology as a tool, and that whatever we are doing with it, it is going to magnify our intent. And so I really come at these talks as thinking about what is our intent to create and how are we going to navigate from there. Because there's a lot of creators out there that are using it for bad. So this is one of many creators on YouTube that I have found who are posting videos every 30 minutes. So this channel, Jojo Funland, which thankfully is no longer available, posted almost 8,000 videos in 5 months. It's just insane. And you can imagine the quality on them was not good. And it's not just that this was a one-off in the gajillions of channels on YouTube. There are many of these that you can find in the kid space, in the adult space, whatnot. YouTube's starting to take steps around this, but it's a very pervasive problem right now. Same as the content itself can be really challenging. I've done lots of sharing of different things that I've found. This is one of the ones that horrifies me most. It's a song ABCs at breakfast. It actually, for the most part, has nothing to do with the ABCs, that even at the point where an apple is on screen, the lyrics do not match. But then on top of that, the child takes a bite of the apple and then this red bloody ooze comes out of its mouth, right? And this is positioned as educational. And there's lots of things that are dangerous. And a lot of this is coming from, there are these posts that are happening, these videos that are very popular, telling you how to make faceless AI kids channels to make money, to make $900 a day, to make $10,000 a month. And you can see, like, these were screenshotted about a month ago, right? They have 400,000 views. And if you've been around a little bit, you probably know that, like, there is no such thing as a free lunch, or in this case, a one-stop video that you're going to post and you're suddenly going to make $900 a day. And so, like, if these folks were actually making that kind of money, they sure would not be telling us how to do it as well. They would be just making bank and replicating lots of these channels, not sharing their secrets. So this is the good old, sort of downsides of YouTube and why I like to talk about this stuff. So when I think about creator guidelines, there's really these 5 areas that I think about most right now. I suspect this will evolve as we, continue to learn and grow around AI, but these are the areas that I really focus on and think about and talk about. So to talk through those, this first one is, we as creators are responsible for the AI output. There, is this notion of human in the loop, which even that can be sort of problematic when you talk to people, but it's a long-standing computer science term that you are controlling whatever the computer is doing, whatever the AI is doing. And you would think on some level I would not need to make this statement, but yet we have the child eating an apple with blood oozing and people creating these channels that don't teach correct information. So really starting from this place of, we have to be willing to take responsibility for everything that the AI is outputting. There is no excuse of just like, Claude made it this way. That doesn't work. The second idea is using restraint. That the notion of, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So just because you can make an image in the style of a popular and famous style doesn't mean that you should go and copy that. Now that's separate from if you are learning the art form, right? Imitation has long been a way that we learn how to do things. But then there's that line of understanding, are you learning or are you posting? Because if you are just posting because you can, piggyback on Coco Melon style, you can piggyback on, Studio Ghibli style, if you can, piggyback on a Pixar style, does not mean that you should be doing that. I also run into things, people pitch me these like really funny ideas and they don't intend to be funny. But there's this just sense of like, what are the products that should exist? And so, it's like, create an app like Wordle, but every word is meow, right? Kind of thing. And then I found out, so I was talking with my daughter and I mentioned this and she's like, well, you've heard of Horsel, right? So there is actually an app out there where the answer is always horse. And then there's another one out there that the answer 90% of the time is Jeff Goldblum. Like, why he got picked on, I don't know. And you get 3 guesses. And now there's an aspect of this where if you're creating it to be funny or ironic, and you're throwing in, like ads on it, like there's something funny to that. But it's when people in all seriousness pitch something, and that art of determining how and why something should exist has kind of been lost to a great extent, because the barrier to entry is so low that now it's just like, great, I've got an idea, let's go build it. And so there's this aspect of just remembering we are designing for specific humans, whether we're designing for little kids, for their parents, for teachers, we're always designing for the regulators, keeping that in mind. So continuing to go to those basics of, just because we can doesn't mean we should, because we need to remember that we are creating for actual users. And that can mean, there's lots of great ways of defining, like, the purpose, or why do you do something? And so there can be very simple statements of like, what problem are you solving? Or what need are you meeting? Or what is the educational goal? Or what is the job of your product? You might have heard of the milkshake, the job of the product of a milkshake. And the story of it, it's Clayton Christensen's framework for product development. And the story goes something like McDonald's discovered that they were selling a lot of milkshakes at breakfast time, which you would think is sort of an unusual time to be eating a milkshake. And so they went out to do research to understand like what's going on with a milkshake in the morning. And it turns out people who were commuting would stop at McDonald's and they needed something that was, high in calories, we'll say. Hey, sorry, dog, come here. And so same dog who shows up in the images is following me around back here and barking at the neighbors. But they found that people wanted something high in calories, so something filling. We won't necessarily say nutritious, but something filling. And they needed to be able to hold it in one hand while they were driving. Now, if you're trying to eat an Egg McMuffin, that's going to be really hard while you're driving. And so they started to find that the job of the milkshake in the morning was to provide breakfast on a commute where people needed a hand for driving, and they needed something filling. So that created this idea of this framework of what is the job of your product. And you can think of it like, what is the job of your video, your music, your show, right? It applies in lots of different ways. The other one I really love is just thinking about even, is your product a vitamin or a pain pill? And so if it's a vitamin, right, exercising is a vitamin. You don't want to do it necessarily, but it's good for you. Maybe watching a documentary is a vitamin, but watching, I'm a big, I don't know if you've seen this $1 Million Nannies show on Hulu. It's just reality TV at its finest. It is a pain reliever. I'm sure nobody will disagree with me that I'm not watching that to learn. I'm watching that for pure entertainment, for that pain pill kind of aspect of things. So it's sort of a fun way to think about products too. Neither one is right or wrong, but it helps you understand the purpose and who you're designing for and the situation you're designing for. Same as like just really fundamental basic tools like product development templates and storyboards can really help measure and help a person evaluate if something is worth pursuing. So I'm a huge fan. Lenny's newsletter has all sorts of product development templates and requirements documents and things to help establish the purpose of a product. Same as storyboards, and this is a very like partial view of a storyboard, but a storyboard fundamentally its goal is to show what's happening on screen, maybe the prompt, maybe the starting frame, but it helps guide you and it can really help you evaluate if this thing is worth developing versus just going straight and prompting and prompting and prompting. So I really love these tools for just continuing to have that restraint to answer the question of should this thing exist. Google Flow is evolving rapidly and has now these vibe coding tools in it that can really help establish with storyboards. I've been using this a lot. I'm doing a workshop incidentally on Thursday, which is related to Google Flow's coding tools, specifically of the date and time at the end. Runway has tools like this. Comfy UI has tools like this. Everything's kind of moving toward this direction. So the third one in this list is around intent. That there's really this idea of that if you're going to use AI responsibly and thoughtfully, you have to know the limits for both yourself and for the AI. Right? And you probably have seen, like if you just create an image of a doctor, you're probably going to get a white man treating a white male patient. That's very, very common. That's what happened in this case. Models are getting better, but they're not there yet. And there's all sorts of different issues you can run into with AI. So you can get issues with bias, with prompt adherence, with bad training data, with context blindness, hallucinations, artifacts, sycophancy, overconfidence, continuity drift, right? There's all these different things. And if you're looking at this list and you're like, ooh, what are some of these things? That's a signal that there's more for you to learn to be able to work with AI thoughtfully and responsibly. Now, you can also be aware as you're reviewing how these things come into play, to be able to notice them, but knowing and understanding that these are shortcomings of AI is really important to using it thoughtfully. So for example, like I put into Claude one day, write lyrics for an educational alphabet song. This is what it gave me and this is just operating on the context that it has been trained on. And as you read through it, it starts pretty, it's probably not the greatest thing, but it starts reasonably okay. But as you start to get down, really around verse 3, Q is for a box of rocks, right? Very nonsensical. Or then you get down to verse 5, and it's X is for fox, the X hides inside. And if you continue pulling this apart, you start to realize things like it breaks its own scheme. It doesn't really have a solid rhythm to it. There's a whole bunch of things that start to fall short. And this is why, like, if you just go into these tools and you just ask it, this is why these one prompt options don't work, because it's going to just give you, it's trained on the whole of the internet. It's just going to give you slop. And a lot of times, what this is now being referred to as in a work context is work slop. Because there's this concept now of whether it's engineers, whether it's marketing, various teams are using AI and they're creating stuff like this. And then it's causing teams to spend more time undoing and pulling apart the AI work. And so I was playing with this idea of just even asking AI to develop an interface for an AI storyteller. And you can probably guess which one is no context and which one has some context to it. So the one on the left, where I just was like, make a children's UI for an AI storyteller app. And again, the more you like start to look at this, the more like sort of disastrous it becomes. My favorite is the tiny little keyboard to type your title or idea into the app. But there starts to be these weird images. You've got weird text going on. There's all sorts of things going on here. Versus if you give it some constraints to say, a modern entertainment facing storytelling app, right? You just give it some basics, it already starts to pull in to look much more like what we would expect a good app to look like. I'm sure there's still problems that we can find as we pull this apart, but you can start to see this at play. So I've run into all of these things with AI when I've worked with it. It has created all sorts of bugs. It has deleted databases on me. I haven't had entire projects deleted, thankfully. In most cases, I have a pretty secure backup system. But you might have heard a couple of weeks ago, there is a company that Claude deleted its entire business code base. It went in, it found the APIs in other places, and it took the whole thing down. Right. So if you're developing production code and you're not ready for that, you could destroy a business. It also creates really inefficient monolithic code. So good code is all sorts of little chunks of things. Bad code is, thousands upon thousands of lines in one file. It will create monolithic code. It will do incorrect API key usages. I've had it go in, pull an API key from a completely unrelated project on my drive and use it and charge $100 in API credits before I caught what was going on, right? And you need to know, like, have limits in there and all those things. It creates visual distractions and bad UX. It will create UI that is going to violate App Store regulations. So you work on this project, then you submit it only to have it rejected. It's going to create word salad where it just jams words together, and incorrect pedagogy and dangerous imitable behaviors, where I have very easily, people have said to me, they're like, oh, well, there's safety prompts in most of the AI tools now. I've been in these tools, I've had it reject something, where I'll say, like, a child takes a sheet of cookies out of the oven without oven mitts, and it will reject that. And then you can just tweak the code, you can tweak the prompt a little bit, and sure enough, I've been able to generate videos of kids pulling a hot cookie sheet out of the oven in their bare hands. That's not stuff you want in a video, but I've seen it in videos. I think I belabored that point. You need to know what the AI can do. But it also means you have to know your skills, right? So you need to understand, you know what these things are that AI can do. But also, if you're creating content for kids, are you a good writer? Are you a good UX designer? Do you understand pedagogy of what is being taught, visual styling, animation, all of these things for kids, right? Most of us have to learn these various skills of things. And so even for me, as I've been creating various things, like when I made the potty dash, I didn't know the recent pedagogy around potty training. And so I needed to go do research on that. And I had AI help me. but I needed to know where the limitations were with AI, that it was probably going to make up information or not give me all of the things I needed. Same as when I was making a tool to detect slop. I am a reasonably technical person, but I was working in code bases and with tools that I was not familiar with. And so while I built this tool out as a prototype, I did not release it publicly because that hits my limitations where I did not feel like I could create production ready code for that particular tool. So there's a lot of understanding what are your own skills, and then how do you learn and grow from there. So one is simply knowing how to prompt for information you might not know. These tools have great research opportunities to them, but there's definitely this aspect too of like asking for full references and links to the resources. And how many times I've clicked on a link and it doesn't even exist. So it will even hallucinate the links. So making sure you're really getting solid information. There's also this, the field of like information architecture has always been around, but it's kind of coming into a new light in the world of AI, that metadata, taxonomies, knowledge graphs, all of these, the structure of information in a machine readable format is really important to tell these systems like this is the body of knowledge you are working with. And to give you a really like straightforward example of that, so when I create lyrics, I have an agent now running that has a structure around it too that goes from getting X is, for a box of rocks, or Q is for a box of rocks, to actually getting me content that works 80 to 90% of the time. And that's by having this instruction file. It's by having references for the writing voice, for what I don't want it to do, for having vocabulary that is approved. So it's not going to give me weird, I don't know, um, like a, K is for knife, which is really like, yes, K is technically for knife, but because of the silent K, it's not used to teach K, or getting like A is for arbitrage or something, completely inappropriate. For phonics rules, so do I want hard G or soft G? Do I want hard C, soft C? Do I want blends? Do I want digraphs, right? All of that. The master prompt for the structural template, and then examples. So by giving it this, I go from getting, slop to getting things that I can actually work with. And that's that idea of starting to really work around these knowledge graphs to give the information that you need. So transparency is this like fourth category that right now, again, this is one that may change, but definitely right now seems like already whether you decide you want to be transparent, the tools and the platforms are moving towards transparency more and more. So I definitely, when I am posting content that is AI created, like on YouTube or whatnot, I am sharing how I have used AI, sharing the tools. Photorealistic content is already really moving towards this mandatory disclosure. Right now, cartoons or like clearly fictional things is still at will, especially on YouTube. Now, in the kids space, I think that's going to change. I don't know. It's really hard to say, but I think for creators to think about trust in their audience and knowing what their audience wants. So a lot of parents are actually okay with AI content so long as it's thoughtfully developed and people are labeling it such. So they have the option to decide whether or not they want to engage with AI content. So I personally believe it's really important to be transparent around it. I think of all of the guidelines, this is the one that's like the most debatable and sort of depends on personal preference. But the thing I care most about is that people think about it and make a determination that is right for their brand, their audience, to really make a decision around this. And privacy is such a critical one. And again, it's one where like it feels like it should be relatively obvious. But I have been in workshops where I'm teaching teachers and they just upload photos of kids without thinking about it, or they upload class rosters without thinking about it. And that's actually violating their school's data privacy policies generally, but also it's like a new form of stranger danger of we don't know where this information is going. There's reports or information that, you remember Pokemon Go, where you'd like run around with your camera taking photos and everything. all of those photos are being used in training data, and there are people who are actually finding like random photos of themselves in these training data sets that are being used for robots to do grocery delivery. I think it's grocery delivery, some form of delivery. So there's just this interesting, we don't know where this information is going to go. Not only are you probably violating privacy laws, and so thinking about that privacy piece is really critical and important. And another one of those things that I feel like I have to call out right now. So that takes us through the 5 that I'm really thinking about from this creator guidelines side of things right now. I'd actually be super curious if there's other ones that you feel like are missing from this already. But it's the idea of responsibility. So being the human in the loop, being the responsible human in the loop. Restraint, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Intent, so knowing the limits of yourself as well as of the AI, and then how do you work within those limits. Transparency, so disclosing when you're using AI, and privacy, so being really aware that you're not sharing personal information. So that is the main body of content. I will take the slides down in a moment, but I mentioned there's 2 more workshops and then a class. So tomorrow I'm doing one that's more into the weeds of creating kids video content with Google Flow. And then on Thursday, really around using the vibe coding tools that are now in Google Flow to personalize your AI animation tools. So I've built some tooling now that I'm using in all of my production to actually like streamline my storyboard creation. It's really fun. It's not 100% because vibe coding is not 100%, but it's really neat. And then next week I am starting I'm teaching making AI videos for kids that aren't slop. So going deeper into all of this, and you can use Happy Moose as a code for 15% off. And if you want to find me, that is my email, carla@hippopolka.com. I do a lot of the writing goes on Substack or LinkedIn. Welcome to find me there too.